Hi, I'm Jenna. The day I told my parents I wanted to join the military, they laughed so hard my mom had to wipe tears from her eyes. Not the good kind, the mocking kind, the kind that stings and sticks with you like a splinter in your pride. You? My dad scoffed. You get winded going up the stairs, and now you're going to be G.I. Jane? He didn't even try to hide the amusement on his face. My mom? She chuckled and muttered something about a phase before switching back to her wine and reality TV. But it wasn't a phase. It was a declaration, one I had whispered to myself for years, late at night with a flashlight under the covers, devouring memoirs and watching documentaries. I wasn't obsessed with war. I was obsessed with discipline, honor, earning my place, something I never felt I had in my own home. Our house in Arlington, Virginia, looked perfect from the outside. 2 stories, white shutters, a neatly trimmed lawn my father mowed every Sunday without fail. But inside, it was a stage, and my parents were always acting, mostly for each other, sometimes for neighbors. Rarely, if ever, for me. I wasn't the child they wanted. I wasn't accomplished, like my older brother Nathan, who graduated top of his class, went to Princeton, and married a woman from Connecticut whose teeth were probably insured. My father, a retired accountant with an inflated sense of glory from his fraternity days, had his life mapped out for me before I hit middle school. Law school, then marriage, then maybe kids. But military? That wasn't on his map. Why would you waste your life on something so violent? My mom said one evening, swiping her perfectly manicured hand through the air like she was shooing away my dreams. You've got potential, Jenna. You could be a paralegal. Or better yet, you could marry a lawyer. I stared at her across the dinner table, my spaghetti going cold. So, my life's only worthwhile if I marry well? She didn't blink. It worked for me. That night, I sat on the roof outside my window, legs dangling into the dark. The stars were brutal in their clarity. I wasn't sure what hurt more, being underestimated or realizing how little they knew me. In that moment, I made a vow, not just to prove them wrong, but to prove to myself that their version of success wasn't the only one worth chasing. A week later, I skipped my junior prom to attend a local military career fair. The gymnasium was stuffy and smelled like old sweat and floor polish, but I felt alive, purposeful. Among the recruiters, one stood out, Sergeant Ellis. He was direct, no nonsense, but when I said I wanted to join, he didn't laugh. You got fire in you? He asked, locking eyes with me like he could see through the bullshit. I don't just have fire, I told him. I've been burning for years. He nodded once. Then don't let it burn you out. Let it fuel you. When I came home that night, still clutching the pamphlet and the name of a training contact, my parents were watching Netflix with their matching wine glasses in hand. I told them I was serious, that I was applying, that I had already taken steps. My dad laughed again, but this time it was quieter. You really want to throw your life away? I didn't answer. I walked past them, straight to my room, and closed the door behind me. I started writing my application that same night. Sometimes silence is louder than screams. And sometimes the people who mock your dreams the loudest are the ones who fear them the most. What would you do if the very people who raised you tried to bury your fire before it ever got a chance to burn? The bus pulled away from the curb with a deep, guttural groan, like even the engine knew the weight of what I was doing. Outside the window, the familiar corners of my street blurred past. The neatly trimmed bushes, the mailboxes perfectly spaced like obedient soldiers. My home, shrinking into the distance like a memory I was already beginning to forget. I didn't say goodbye. Not to my mom, not to my dad. Just a note, folded once, left on the kitchen table under the fruit bowl. Don't wait up. Freedom wasn't euphoric. It was sharp, terrifying, and raw. But it was mine. Basic training started in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. The summer heat was suffocating, like stepping into someone else's mouth. The first morning, a drill sergeant screamed so close to my face, I could smell the tobacco on his breath. I didn't flinch. Not because I wasn't scared. I was. But because fear was a language I was fluent in. And finally, I had something to say back. "You think this is hard?" he barked. "This is day one, sweetheart." I looked him in the eye and said, "I've had worse mornings at home, sir." He stared at me for a second longer than necessary before turning away with a grunt. That was the beginning of mutual respect. It was silent, unspoken, but it grew. Training broke a lot of people. The physical pain, the psychological grind. I saw strong men cry into their pillows at night, but I never broke, not because I was stronger, but because I had to survive. Failure meant going back to that table, that wine glass, that suffocating ceiling of expectations. There were moments I wanted to quit. During a midnight crawl through freezing mud, when my hands went numb and my knees bled through my fatigues. During a brutal endurance run, where I came in dead last. But each time, I imagined my parents' voices, laughing, dismissing, reducing me, and I pushed harder. One night, near the halfway mark, I sat alone on a bench under the floodlights by the mess hall. My fingers were blistered, my boots were soaked. I felt hollowed out, scraped to the core. That's when Ava sat down beside me. She was a fiery girl from Detroit, with a sharp tongue and a heart big enough to carry others when they stumbled. We hadn't talked much before that night. "You got that look," she said, pulling off her gloves. "The one where you're already halfway gone in your head." "Just wondering if I'm out of my depth," I admitted. She studied me, then said, "You know what the difference is between people who make it and people who don't? It ain't strength, it's who you're running from and who you're running toward." Her words hung in the air like gospel. That night, I stopped thinking about what I was escaping and started building an image of who I wanted to become. By the end of the third month, I was top of my squad. Quietly, no fanfare, no big speeches, just consistent grit. Sergeant Ellis, who'd been transferred to our base, took notice. During final drills, he called me forward. "You're the only one here who never whines. Never makes excuses," he said. "I didn't know that was optional, sir." He smirked. "You ever consider officer candidate school?" I blinked. "What?" "You've got potential, real leadership bones. That fire? It's not just for pushing through pain, it's for lighting the way." That night, I wrote a letter, not to my parents, but to myself, the girl who used to cry in her room while her mom scrolled Instagram and her dad complained about gas prices. I told her she was right to want more, that she wasn't crazy for thinking love should feel different, that discipline, loyalty, and honor weren't just words, they were values worth building a life around. 1 week before graduation, we were allowed a short phone call to family. I stared at the number for my house. My thumb hovered, but I called someone else. Ava's mom. A stranger, really, but someone who had sent me a care package when she found out my family hadn't. "Mrs. Ramirez?" I said when she answered. "Jenna?" she replied, surprised. "Are you okay?" "I just wanted to say thank you for the socks and the card and for seeing me." There was a pause. Then a soft maternal voice. "We're proud of you, sweetheart. So proud." I cried for the first time that day, not from pain, but from being seen. Sometimes freedom doesn't feel like flying. It feels like crawling through mud. Until one day, you stand up and realize you've crossed the border into becoming. Do you think being underestimated can be a secret superpower? The desert didn't care if you cried. Afghanistan wasn't a place where people came to find themselves. It was where people got stripped down to their core. And whatever was left, that was who you really were. I arrived during a sandstorm, the kind that turned the sky rust orange and made your skin feel like it was being erased, grain by grain. Our unit had been deployed for peacekeeping and logistics support, but it didn't take long to realize the paperwork was the least of the battle. It started small. I noticed details. A supply chain mistake here, a broken comlink there. Most folks chalked it up to the usual chaos of operations. But I knew better. My mind had been honed by years of deciphering unspoken rules at home, of reading between silences. That instinct was sharper than ever. I brought it to my CO's attention, a young lieutenant, eager but overloaded. "You're saying someone's screwing with our manifest on purpose?" "I'm saying the same 2 crates are going missing every time, and no one's asking why." He looked skeptical, but he didn't dismiss me. "Write a report." I did more than that. I found the route logs, reviewed the satellite data, cross-referenced comm logs, and it led me to a private who'd been passing intel to a local militia group. Small things, but dangerous. We shut it down before anyone got killed. But word got around, fast. One night, after the operation wrapped, I was called to the tent of Captain Reese. He wasn't someone you met unless something big had happened, or you were in serious trouble. "You have a knack for patterns," he said without preamble. "You ever think about intelligence?" I hesitated. "Not really. I always thought I was more action than analysis." Reese smirked. "Analysis is action. The right data saves more lives than bullets." That was the night the second door opened. The next few months were a blur of briefings, encrypted files, night ops, and hush-hush missions. I wasn't kicking down doors. I was watching them, reading the movements, predicting behaviors. And, unexpectedly, I was good at it. I remember one mission in particular. A convoy route we'd used 6 times before suddenly changed last minute. It was a gut feeling. Too quiet on the southern perimeter. Too many eyes where there hadn't been before. I flagged it. The route was changed. 2 days later, a bomb was found right where we would have been. That saved 33 lives. No medals were handed out. No speeches were made. But that night, my unit looked at me differently. Not with surprise anymore, but with trust. And then came the letter. I hadn't heard from my parents in nearly a year. But on a Wednesday morning, during morning chow, an envelope with my father's handwriting showed up in my mail stack. I stared at it like it might detonate. "Open it," Ava said quietly, who'd been deployed to the same base by pure luck. Or maybe fate. I tore the envelope. Inside, a folded sheet, short, formal. "Too neat. Jenna, saw you in that Pentagon photo. Didn't know they let girls like you in that deep. Guess I was wrong. Dad." That was it. No apology, no warmth. Just acknowledgement, wrapped in sarcasm and sealed with passive aggression. "What a guy," Ava muttered, reading over my shoulder. I didn't cry. I laughed. And then I burned the letter in a tin can behind the barracks. It felt good. Like burying the old version of myself he thought he still had power over. My reputation grew, quietly. I got clearance that other soldiers didn't. Started liaising with higher-ups. There was talk of a meeting in D.C., a conference. Strategic minds from different branches. They wanted me there. "Me?" I asked Reese, almost stunned. "You see what others don't. We need more of that." And so, they flew me back. Not home, to the capital. And I stood there, pressed uniform, intel badge, boots polished so sharp they reflected the ceiling, at a reception hall filled with the highest military leaders in the country. And the president. We shook hands. His grip was steady. "You're the one who caught the route hack in Sector 4? "Yes, sir." "You saved lives. And that matters." The photo was taken right then. Me, stone-faced, but not from nerves. From purpose. The air in D.C. felt too clean. I hadn't been stateside long enough to adjust. It was sterile in the way that made you forget wars were still happening across oceans. Still, when you're wearing dress blues and standing in a room full of America's power brokers, you learn to hold your breath and smile like you belong. What I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that someone had taken a photo. It wasn't official. It wasn't staged. Just a quiet click from a phone camera, someone snapping a candid moment of me shaking hands with the president, eyes locked in conversation, his hand resting firmly on my shoulder. Within hours, it was online. Within a day, it was viral. The headlines weren't subtle. Unknown soldier steals spotlight in presidential briefing. Who is Jenna Holt? The woman behind the strategic win in Afghanistan. Military intel star sparks debate on modern leadership. I found out in the worst possible way. My phone lit up during a briefing. Over a dozen missed calls. Most from numbers I didn't recognize. One from Ava. "Hey, you need to get online," she said. I pulled up the news and nearly dropped my phone. There I was. Not just in a photo, but in headlines, with panels speculating about my background, my achievements, and, inevitably, my family. I should have seen it coming. The call from my mother. "Jenna," she began, her voice sugary with an undertone of desperation I hadn't heard since she wanted my help picking out a new kitchen backsplash. "We saw the news. Why didn't you tell us?" "I didn't think you'd care." She didn't skip a beat. "Of course we care. This is huge. I mean, your father's been talking about it nonstop. He even showed your picture to the guys at the club." I stayed silent. "Sweetheart," she added, softening. "Maybe this is a good time to come home. Just for a visit. Maybe do a little press?" My stomach dropped. "You think I'd use this for press?" "Oh, come on, don't be dramatic. It's not about us. It's just, people are curious. You're practically a celebrity now." "I'm a soldier, not a product." She sighed, audible and heavy. "Fine, if that's how you want to be." Click. That was it. Not pride, not concern. Just disappointment that I wouldn't let them piggyback off something they had nothing to do with building. But the twist came 2 days later. A childhood neighbor texted me a link. "Thought you should see this," it read. I clicked it. It was an article, local newspaper, title, "Holt Family, Raising a Hero." There they were, my parents. Sitting in our living room, my old trophies arranged neatly on the mantel behind them. My mother in pearls, my father in his old navy blazer, holding a coffee mug I hadn't seen since high school. They were being interviewed, telling my story. But not as it happened, as they wanted it told. My dad spoke of years of sacrifice. My mom about supporting Jenna every step of the way. Photoshopped reality for the public. They had turned my life, my escape, from their shadow into a spotlight they were trying to reclaim. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred. Ava knocked on my door. "You okay?" I turned the screen toward her. She read it silently, then said, "You gonna let them do that?" And something in me cracked, not like glass, but like thunder. I didn't call them, I called my CO. "There's going to be blowback," I told him. "They're manipulating a national moment for personal gain." He leaned back, folded his arms. "You want this scrubbed?" "No, I want to speak." "You sure?" "I need to reclaim my story." 2 days later, I sat for an exclusive. Not a tell-all, not a revenge piece, just truth. I talked about being overlooked, about finding strength in doubt, about redefining family, not as biology, but as the people who show up when no one else does. I didn't mention my parents by name. I didn't need to. People read between lines. The public isn't as blind as we think. The reaction was thunderous, supportive, emotional, personal. People shared their own stories. Kids who were disowned for being different. Veterans who'd returned home to silence. Women who were told they weren't strong enough, brave enough, good enough. One message stood out. It was from a woman in Iowa. Single mom. Her daughter had enlisted and faced opposition from her church, her family, even her siblings. "Thank you for showing her she's not alone. She watched your interview 5 times, said she wants to be like you." Sometimes the people who break you early in life never expect you to come back with the whole world listening. What would you do if your worst critics tried to ride your greatest victory? It started with a knock. Not on my door, but inside my mind. A growing pressure I couldn't shake. The viral momentum hadn't died down. In fact, it had gained weight. It followed me into briefings, into cafeterias, onto bases where strangers nodded in respect, but didn't know the cost of the path I walked. Then came the call. Not from my parents, from Nathan. "Jenna?" His voice cracked with the same stilted awkwardness I remembered from childhood. Can we talk? I hadn't spoken to my brother in nearly 3 years. He'd stayed out of the family dynamics, played Switzerland while our parents lit matches. About what? It's about Mom and Dad. They want to see you. They're planning something. I agreed to meet them, not at their house, at a neutral place, a quiet coffee shop on the outskirts of Arlington, where the baristas didn't blink at uniforms or tears. They arrived 5 minutes late, dressed like they were headed to brunch with the governor. My mother in a cream trench coat, my father in the same blazer from the newspaper article. It still reeked of performance. Jenna, my mom said, voice airy, you look so official. I stayed seated. Let's skip the small talk. My dad cleared his throat. We wanted to talk face to face, about everything. Maybe start over? I laughed, sharp and quick. Start over? After you rewrote my life in the press? My mom's smile faltered. We were proud. We wanted to share that with the world. No, you wanted to borrow my pride. There's a difference. The silence between us stretched so long it hummed. Then she played her card. We were approached by a publisher. My stomach twisted. They want a book, she continued, about raising a daughter who made it in the military. It could be inspirational. You know, your childhood, your discipline. My childhood? I cut in. You mean the one where you laughed at my dreams, mocked my body, and ignored every achievement that didn't align with your version of success? My father leaned in. It doesn't have to be exact, just polished, marketable. Let me be clear, I said, steady. You will not profit from my pain. You will not rewrite your neglect into some American dream fairy tale. My mother's expression cracked. She wasn't used to resistance. We made mistakes, Jenna, but we're still your parents. No, I said. You're just the people I share DNA with. That doesn't earn you access to my story. I left before the barista could refill my coffee. Outside, the cold wind slapped color into my face, and for the first time, I felt the weight of walking away, not with regret, but with relief. Later that night, Nathan called. You really cut them off. I had to. He was quiet, then added, You're the bravest person in our family. The next morning, I found out my parents had gone ahead with the book proposal, without me. A leaked pitch made its way to a blogger who recognized the inconsistency between their version and my public interview. The backlash was swift. The story trended for all the wrong reasons. Parents of decorated soldier accused of exploiting daughter's service. My story, not theirs. A cautionary tale of fame, family, and false narratives. I didn't ask for it, but the world had chosen a side. And this time, it was mine. Sometimes the real homecoming isn't about going back. It's about walking away and knowing you're finally free to build forward. What would you do if telling the truth meant losing the only family you had left? I thought it was over. I thought walking away from my parents, refusing their carefully curated reconciliation, was the final page of that chapter. But truth has a cruel habit of leaving breadcrumbs, and someone always follows them. The call came from Ava late one night, her voice taut with something I couldn't name yet. You need to see this, she said. Now. She texted me a screenshot. It was a post from a veterans support forum, one I'd spoken on a few weeks back after the interview. Someone had flagged a fundraiser, a link supposedly started by the Holt family, for military family charities, inspired by Jenna's journey. The post had my face, my rank, my service history, even a quote from one of my speeches. But it wasn't affiliated with me. At all. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I called my legal contact through the military's public affairs division. Within hours, we traced the PayPal. It was tied to a shell company registered 2 months ago in Virginia. Guess who the listed owners were? Christine and Richard Holt, my mother and father. This wasn't just embellishing facts in a hometown paper. This wasn't just pretending they'd supported me. This was fraud. Thousands of dollars had been donated. People I had spoken to directly, veterans, families of deployed soldiers, had contributed, believing it would help real causes. I sat in my apartment, my hands shaking. They're not just using my name, I told Ava, my voice hollow. They're using everyone's pain to build a brand. Ava didn't say anything right away. Then quietly, "You know what this means?" I nodded. "It means I can't just walk away this time. I have to fight." I didn't go public immediately. I went quiet. I contacted legal advisors. I coordinated with military counsel. If they wanted to make this a performance, I was going to build a case airtight enough to leave them speechless. 2 weeks later, a cease and desist letter was delivered. Then, a formal complaint filed through the Department of Justice's Military Fraud Division. What followed was brutal. My parents retaliated, hard. They posted on Facebook, shared "Jenna betrayed her family" narratives. My mother published a blog post about how I'd turned on the very people who gave her life. My father started a podcast. I didn't respond. Until the hearing. I wasn't required to speak, but I requested time anyway. In front of a modest panel of civilian investigators and military legal observers, I laid it bare. Not just the financial manipulation, not just the public misrepresentation. I spoke of abandonment, of emotional control, of what it means to build something from nothing while being watched by people waiting for you to fail, and then trying to steal your success when you didn't. No tears, no trembling, just truth. Afterward, a woman from the panel approached me privately. Middle-aged, simple black suit, military pin on her lapel. "You reminded me of my daughter," she said. "She walked away from our family too. I never understood why. Until now." She placed her card in my hand and left without another word. 2 months later, the fraudulent fundraiser was taken down. Legal warnings issued. Public apologies released. My parents, facing pressure, backed off. Their podcast disappeared overnight. So did the blog. But what I lost wasn't recovered with justice. There's no court that gives back what childhood never gave. What do you do when telling your truth still isn't enough? Because the people who hurt you keep rewriting the ending. I used to think peace was silence, the absence of conflict, a room without yelling, a phone that didn't buzz with guilt. But peace, real peace, it has weight. It fills the room. It shows up not when things are quiet, but when you no longer feel the need to explain yourself. 3 years had passed since the tribunal. Since the last time my mother tried to contact me through an email written like a press release. Cold, detached, desperate. I never responded. Instead, I kept moving forward. Promotions, global briefings, a permanent role within a strategic intelligence task force that required me to split my time between DC and European Command. My uniform changed, my badge changed, but the real difference was internal. I no longer measured success by the noise it made. That summer, I stood at a podium in Chicago, looking out over a sea of cadets and families at a military graduation. Rows and rows of eyes, some tear-filled, some proud, some terrified. The speech wasn't about war stories. It was about becoming. You don't have to be born into greatness, I told them. You can carve it out with bloody hands, tired feet, and a voice that never stays down long. Thunderous applause followed. But it was what happened afterward that cracked something open in me. A girl, barely out of high school, approached me, her palms shaking as she held out a folded paper. "My parents don't want me to do this," she said, "but I want to fight for something that's mine." I looked her in the eye. "Then make them listen to the life you build, not the silence they prefer." She smiled. "Thank you, ma'am, for showing me that strength doesn't have to be loud." Back in DC, I got a letter. Handwritten. From Nathan. "Jenna, they sold the house. They're moving to Florida. Dad's sick, not dying. Just the kind of sick that turns loud people quiet. Mom's been reading a lot of self-help books. It's weird. They talk about you less now. I think it's because they finally realized they can't control the ending. I'm proud of you, always have been. If you ever want to talk about anything, I'm here." Nathan, I didn't cry, but I sat with the letter for a long time. Then I picked up a pen and wrote back. Nathan, thank you. I'm glad you're still standing. Some of us had to survive in silence just to find our voice. I don't know if I'll ever come back, but I'm glad you reached out. J. Later that year, I returned to Arlington. Not to my childhood home. There was nothing there for me anymore. But I passed the street. The trees looked smaller, the houses closer together. And I didn't feel dread, just distance. A local school had invited me to speak to a group of girls from underrepresented backgrounds. Future leaders, they called them. Some wanted to be astronauts. Some, scientists. A few, soldiers. One girl raised her hand. Do your parents support what you do now? I paused, then answered honestly. Not in the way I needed them to. But here's the thing. Sometimes, we don't get to choose who roots for us. What we get to choose is what we root ourselves in. She nodded, like she understood more than her age should have allowed. The last time I saw my parents was through a screen. An interview. They were older, tired. My mom's eyes were duller. My dad's hands trembled slightly. They were guests on a podcast about forgiveness. They didn't mention me by name, but they spoke of mistakes, of regret. It wasn't enough. It never would be. But I didn't feel the rage anymore, just space. And space is a gift. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's never needing their permission again. If you could write your own ending, what would you leave behind? And what would you carry with you? Looking back, if there's one truth I carry with me, it's this. You don't need permission to build a life that honors who you truly are. Not everyone will understand your fire. Some will try to snuff it out, especially those closest to you. But your worth isn't determined by applause. It's forged in the quiet moments when you keep going, even when no one believes in you but yourself. So here's my question to you. Have you ever had to walk away from someone in order to become the person you were meant to be? What did it cost, and what did it give you? If this story moved you or reminded you of your own journey, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from or share your experience. And if this video sparked something in you, hope, courage, even anger, hit that subscribe button so you won't miss the next story. Your voice matters. Let's keep telling stories that do too.